USS Abraham Lincoln. That's the aircraft carrier stationed in the Middle East fighting Donald Trump's war of choice against Iran. The United States Navy is now sending a different aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington, to potentially relieve the USS Lincoln of its duties and send its crew back home. For the sailors on board the USS Lincoln, it has been a long and a grueling 9 months of deployment. In the 266 days since it left its home port of San Diego, its crew has only had the chance to spend 2 days on dry land. The morale on board has deteriorated amid dire food and supply shortages and these unsanitary living conditions. One young man jumped overboard, and others have reportedly attempted to do the same. But it's not just the crew members aboard the USS Lincoln who have been suffering. Their loved ones back here in America have felt somewhat helpless as the complaints about life on board have piled up. During in-person and virtual meetings with Navy officials last week, many family members aired their grievances and pleaded for information on when the crew would return home. Some people were, quote, in tears asking leaders what was being done to address issues of mental health and exhaustion. One mother shared that her daughter told her that she, quote, believes she is going to die on the ship. In an account from the publication Stars and Stripes, one woman said that she received a message from her husband saying that, quote, he hopes he doesn't wake up tomorrow. Another attendee summed it up this way. They told Navy officials that the military had, quote, broken trust between us and leadership. And when asked today about the growing list of concerns regarding the physical and mental well-being of these service members, here's what Donald Trump had to say. That is on top of the comment that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave yesterday, claiming that the U.S. can keep its naval blockade, quote, indefinitely. So when the USS Lincoln appears like it's headed home soon, the Trump administration is not really giving any assurances the blockade itself is coming to an end at any point. And during his speech at a police academy in Long Island this afternoon, Trump said that he had even bigger plans for the Strait of Hormuz. Listen.
And after we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States.
Look, Trump is facing a lot of problems right now that he has driven his approval numbers to all-time lows. Many of his own voters have expressed disapproval over his war with Iran and the economic toll it has taken here at home on Americans. The war has led to a spike in threats, including last month when he was reportedly secretly whisked away from an Air Force One jet via an airport catering truck onto a different plane due to a threat on his life from Iran. One senior Secret Service official told MS Now that Trump is now the focus of more threats than any modern president. And because of that, the Secret Service has gone as far as to request that the military install an anti-aircraft missile launcher at Trump's golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey, which is where Trump plans to spend this weekend. Joining me now to discuss are MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar and MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode. So, Priya, before we get started, I want to embarrass you a little bit for a moment because Priya and I have known each other since we were kids, and I just want our audience to know how amazing this woman is. She, just a few months ago, had a baby, got a master's degree, I think her second master's degree, is that right?
It was my second one, Catherine. Thanks for embarrassing me.
and now she is breaking these fantastic, really important stories that are of great meaning to our service members and those of us back home who are being protected by them. So Priya, let's talk about your story last week, now that I've embarrassed you, about the meeting between military families and Navy officials. You noted, quote, Acting Navy Secretary Hung Cao said that the aircraft carrier USS George Washington was not considered an option for replacing the Lincoln because the U.S. has to have a presence in the South Pacific, and there were operational commitments it had there. Initially, they said that the USS Theodore Roosevelt would be sent to replace the USS Lincoln. So how did this come to happen?
Yeah, Catherine, this is a super fascinating development because many of the families at that town hall were asking the acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Kao, why can't we send the USS George Washington to the Middle East? Because it would obviously get there much faster than the Roosevelt. And Hung Kao basically told them, well, we can't do that because we have to leave an aircraft carrier in the Indo-Pacific area as essentially a deterrent to some of the United States adversaries like China, North Korea, and Russia. So they were just going to have to wait a little bit longer and wait for the Roosevelt. But it seems like right now, the leadership and the administration is scrambling, trying to relieve the Lincoln and sort of get rid of this bad publicity that they're receiving because these service members are really struggling. But this is really going to have a domino effect, Catherine. I know that we've been talking a lot about the depletion of stockpiles of weapons and the fact that Tehran and Moscow and Beijing are watching that extremely closely. Well, you can bet that Beijing is going to be watching this as a potential another opportunity. This is really leaving the United States in a vulnerable position, moving this aircraft carrier away from that region into the Middle East.
David, Acting Navy Secretary Hung Kao described these changes as, quote, a planned rotation. But based on what we're hearing from Priya's reporting and others, it doesn't sound like the military was prepared to do this now. What are the risks of the U.S. having limited or no naval presence in the South Pacific?
It's China. In short, I met with some U.S. intelligence officials recently and asked them, how much do they think China was helping Iran, and then would they make a move on Taiwan? The feeling, initially was that China was sort of happy to sit back and watch the Trump administration mismanage this war, and they haven't seen indications yet that China would try to, take control of Taiwan. That would be an incredibly dramatic development, but you just don't know. As the administration sort of is moving, as Priya said, it's a surprise that they've now made this decision to move the one carrier out of that area that sort of protects Taiwan. So that could create an opportunity for China. You said it yourself, Catherine, the lack of planning from beginning to end, that has been the problem, and the planning for sort of worst case scenarios. Clearly, this administration never thought this war would last 6 months, and here we are.
Priya, we've been talking about the acting Navy Secretary. He posted a statement on X earlier today. It read in part, quote, "Unfortunately, the media are trying to paint our warriors as victims. Not only is that dishonest, but it takes away the focus on the enemy and the threat it poses against our nation, people, and way of life," unquote. The administration has been dismissive of some of these reports, but it's obviously a serious matter for the sailors and their families. Have you gotten any reaction from any of the family members about comments like this or the news that the USS Washington is heading to the Middle East?
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. I can say that I received so many text messages when Hung Kao first posted that on social media, and we subsequently saw Sean Parnell, also the chief spokesperson for the Pentagon, also tweeting, and then also Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth himself. They all had very similar messaging, blaming the media, of course, for characterizing these family members and these service members as victims. And I would say the overall, if I were to paraphrase the emotions of the family members that I've spoken to about all of that, was they feel honestly as though they're being gaslit. But at the same time, they're so excited to hear this news about the Washington moving into the Middle East, which is going to potentially relieve the Lincoln. So they want to focus on that piece of news right now. They're extremely hopeful because just about a week ago, before I started reporting about all of this, they felt extremely abandoned by this administration. They felt as though their 5,000 loved ones who were sailing around in that ship had essentially been forgotten about, and that no one cared about the conditions that they were suffering in fighting this war. So I think they're happy that all of this reporting has put a lot of pressure on this administration to do something and to bring these service members home.
David, let me play you another comment that President Trump made this afternoon about the Iran war. Take a listen.
For you to pay a tiny little bit more for your gasoline, just remember you're doing it so that a very evil country cannot have a country. Really, it's the #1 state sponsor of terror in the world. We don't want to have them have a nuclear weapon. So remember that when you have to pay a little bit more, you're at $4. It's okay. I mean, it's I'll never apologize. I did the right thing.
So, David, I spoke with Congressman Seth Moulton last night, and he made this point that service members can lose motivation if they don't know or they don't understand what they are fighting for. Can you talk to us a little bit about the overall morale in the military in regard to Iran and the president's incoherent messaging around it?
I'll talk about the president's incoherent message. I think Priya knows better in terms of morale, but I think it's a lack of strategy. And just so the statement there, he's gone back to we're going to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. There's no plan for how that would actually happen, at least in the short term. It's, the demands have gone from, help is on the way, was what President Trump said when the war was announced, to Iran had to give up its stockpile of enriched uranium, to Iran, please open the Strait of Hormuz. So at this point, the United States can't even the Trump administration can't get tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. 2 more tankers were fired on today. They were from the United Arab Emirates by the Iranians. And so the president, the problem too is he keeps making these sweeping statements. He's made them for months, and they've sort of lost their power, I think, in terms of pressuring Iran. So I still don't understand the clear strategy. There's some hope that an economic blockade will, change things, but this is a very repressive government in Iran, and it can withstand a lot of economic pain, and many of its people suffer, though, as a result.
So, Priya, could you talk a little bit to the morale question and to what extent some of the exhaustion and mental stress that we are seeing or that you're reporting on is related to sort of the lack of understanding of what this mission is? Does that matter? I mean, you served yourself as a naval officer. Does it matter for our service members if there isn't a clear objective?
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. And, it was interesting because Sean Parnell, when he posted on X today, he talked about some of the own deployments that he's been on. And of course, Acting Secretary of the Navy Hung Cao also served in the Navy himself. But I think what we have to remember right now is this was not a standard deployment. This aircraft carrier hit a modern day record for the most number of continuous days at sea. 208 days it didn't make a port call. Typically, aircraft carriers stop at port anywhere from 30 to 45 days. And I can tell you, as someone who wore a uniform, who's been on an aircraft carrier, many of my closest friends in the world are people who have served and gone on multiple deployments. Knowing that you're going to have a little bit of a break, that's what you're constantly counting down to in your head. And so when your deployment keeps getting extended, you're following the news on your phone, you're trying to understand what is the end state here? What is the objective? You start to see that perhaps there isn't one. And then when the president is making these comments that, oh, we can just have, this naval blockade indefinitely, I think that's very alarming to many people. And many of the family members that I spoke with said that they voted specifically for President Trump because he said he wasn't going to get our United States military involved in any sort of forever war. So I do think that service members really do follow the politics and the policy very closely because it impacts their lives so closely. There are so many service members on there who haven't even met their babies who were born on these deployments.